One of my many favorite songs is a song written by Bob Dylan and sung by Rod Stewart. I like his version better than Bob Dylan's Stewart. And it's like the title of the sermon this morning or this afternoon, Forever Young. And you may remember it. And it says, "May the good Lord be with you down every road you roam, and may sunshine and happiness surround you when you're far from home. And may you grow to be proud, dignified, and true. And do unto others as you would have done to you. Be courageous and be brave. And in my heart, you'll always stay forever young. May good fortune be with you. May your guiding light be strong. Build a stairway to heaven with a prince or with a vagabond. And may you never love in vain, and in my heart you will remain forever young. And when you finally fly away, I'll be hoping that I serve you well. For all the wisdom of a lifetime, no one can ever tell. But whatever road you choose, I'm right behind you, win or lose, forever young." And would that we could all be forever young. Juan Ponce de Leon persuaded the King of Spain to grant him men and ships and funds to search for the infamous fountain of youth. According to myth, whoever took a bath in that fountain would be forever young. And the king granted him his request, and he became the European that discovered what nowadays is the state of Florida. He named it Pascua de Florida, the Feast of Flowers, after the Spanish Easter holiday. He landed in Florida on Easter Sunday, and he explored the state between 1513 and 1521. He never found the fountain. Back in 1997, I woke up on the morning of August 31st to the terrible news of the death of Princess Diana. Remember that event? How many of you were still around? Already around. I was stunned. I was surprised. That day, we were staying at Disney. My daughter Cami was only like 3 years old. And I didn't know what to think, what to say. She was the world's princess. And in a few days, in a matter of minutes, she was gone. She was gone in the prime of her life. I never read the diary of Anne Frank, but I saw the movie, and I visited the place where they were hiding all those terrible days until they were captured by the Nazis, and she died when she was a teenager. And when I moved to this country, I discovered American TV in English. I have seen American TV, but the Spanish version of American TV. And for me, that meant Happy Days. It meant the Three Stooges and the Little Rascals. I even had the opportunity to meet one of the Little Rascals. You know that he became an Adventist pastor? Any of you seen the Little Rascals? One of them became an Adventist pastor, and I had the opportunity to meet him. We can go back and turn on the TV in some stations, and we will still find them. They will still be children. They will still be young forever. And there's a dozen of movies and rock stars that we can talk about that lost their life at a young age. One day, after a concert in Clear Lake, Iowa, a young musician chartered a plane to get to the next town with some extra time so that they could rest. And on the morning of February the 3rd, 1959, the plane carrying Buddy Holly, he was 23, Richard Valenzuela, Richie Valens, 18, and J. Perry Richardson, the Big Bopper, was 29, took off from Mason City, Iowa, and it crashed just 8 miles away, killing everyone on board. En route to compete in a race in Salinas, California, James Dean was killed on a highway accident on September 30th, 1955. He was 24. Freddie Prinze was a young Latino stand-up comedian who made people laugh in a popular 1970s TV sitcom, Chico and the Man. Freddie shot himself at the age of 23, adding to the long list of Hollywood stars who die young. Even Jesus, our Lord, died at a very young age. And this morning, I want to take you to the book of Ecclesiastes. In the book of Ecclesiastes, we find the preacher, he calls himself. And the preacher kind of takes life as an onion, if we could say, and he starts peeling every layer of the onion and starts talking to us about what life is like, what life is about, and what we should care for in life. But I want to go to the last part of the book, in Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 1. The preacher says, some Bibles, instead of preacher says, the teacher says, remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble come and the years approach when you will say, I find no pleasure in them. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars grow dark and the clouds return after the rain, when the keepers of the house tremble and the strong men stoop, when the grinders cease because they are few and those looking through the windows grow dim, when the doors to the streets are closed and the sounds of grinding fades, when men rise up at the sound of birds, but all their songs grow faint, when men are afraid of heights and of dangers in the streets, when the almond tree blossoms and the grasshopper drags himself along and desire no longer is astir, then man goes to his eternal home and mourners go about the streets. Remember him before the silver cord is severed, or the golden bowl is broken, before the pitcher is shattered at the spring, or the wheel broken at the well, and the dust returns to the ground it came from, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Everything is meaningless. I want to consider these verses for a few minutes. Verse 1 says, remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble come and the years approach when you will say, I find no pleasure in them. The Hebrew word translated as remember in our Bible is the word zakar. And it's the same word used in 1 Samuel 1:19, if you want to take the time. 1 Samuel 1:19, there we find the prayer of Hannah. Remember Hannah, the mother of Samuel? She is praying, and in 1 Samuel 1:19 says that the Lord remembered Hannah. And then she conceived, and of course had a baby. I like the way the Message puts it. The Message says, God began making the necessary arrangements in response to what she had asked. God started working on behalf of Hannah. Of course, it's not a literal translation. The literal translation is, the Lord remembered Hannah, but that doesn't mean the same thing. In this case, remember goes beyond what we usually mean or what we usually understand by remembering. We remember where we left the car keys. Well, sometimes we don't, but we usually remember. If you are so educated so as to you have a place where you always keep your car keys, then you would know. You don't even need to remember. I'm totally terrible about that kind of things. I leave my keys everywhere. Sometimes I wish I had a beeper so I could find my keys. And we remember our name. We remember the place where we were born. We remember who our parents are. We remember all sorts of things. We remember what we saw on TV last night. The sense here is like when we remember somebody's birthday, somebody's anniversary, and we take the time, even if it's through Facebook or Twitter, to send them a message saying, hey, happy birthday. And of course, It could go beyond that. We actually said, I'm sending you this special something. That kind of remembering, where you actually do something. Not just, I remember the Lord today. I forgot to pray. God began making the necessary arrangements in response to what she had asked. We could change, remember your Creator, to make the necessary arrangements in your relationship with God. What arrangements are you making? The preacher, the teacher is saying, now, well, you have a chance. Well, you're still young. Make the necessary arrangements. Well, you're still alive with your Creator. Why? Because the days of trouble come and the years approach when you will say, I find no pleasure in them. Sometimes we hear people talking about the good old days. Keep in mind that today, that these, for you and me, are the good old days. These are the good old days. You may complain. You may think that they're terrible. But these are your good old days. These are my good old days. And the preacher is saying, remember the Lord. Do something about the Lord right now. Because these are for you the good old days. The times ahead are terrible. Remember your Creator. Where you're growing up, where we still have hair in our heads and our teeth complete, full in our mouth, where we can get up in the morning with our body aches, where we're able to walk without a cane, because the days of trouble are ahead. And listen to what he says next. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars grow dark and the clouds return after the rain. One of my favorite things is to go to the Weather Channel and to see what's going to come ahead. And on the phone, I like to go and see what the weather is like here and what the weather is like in different places where I have family or friends, and to see how hot or how cold or whatever it is like. And I like to see, and they show you what it's going to be like tomorrow. And here they like to tell you what's going to be in the desert and in the ocean and the different places. It gives you a panorama of what's coming ahead. In other words, think of these verses as a forecast channel, and it doesn't look good. The preacher says that there are gloomy days ahead. As your strength fades, as my strength fades, as your youth stays behind, you and I are confronted with the bitter outlook of an older person. I met your pastor, Luis Carlos Ramirez. Ramirez was his dad, Luis Carlos, when we were teenagers. We had more hair. We weren't as heavy as we are nowadays. We didn't have gray hair. But that was then, and this is now. And these, for me and for you, are the good old days. When the keepers of the house tremble, when your lips start to tremble, either because you forgot to put on your false teeth, or because you have Parkinson's or some other disease and your lips start to tremble. Look at old people. And that's where you and I are headed. And the strong men stoop when your legs, where your lower back. There was a time where I could do, I don't know how many sit-ups. Now I can hardly get out of bed. And when the grinders cease because they are few. I had a friend in college that he would always complain about his teeth. He says, I have one left. All the rest are false, because we start losing our teeth. It wasn't until maybe 5 years ago that I started going to the dentist. I had never gone to the dentist in my life. I felt so proud of myself, so happy. I don't need to go to the dentist, until they began to fall off one by one. All of a sudden, we were eating someplace. We were going from Orlando to where we lived in Maryland, and all of a sudden, I felt something in my mouth. I thought, there was something wrong with this, whatever I was eating at the time, and it was a piece of tooth. It just came off. And then another one on the other side. And then another one. It's like, the grinders cease because they're becoming few. And those looking through the windows grow dim. I have worn glasses all my life, since I was 4 years old, I'm told. But I had always managed, even with the glasses, to read. One day, I clearly remember, one Sunday morning, I got up, I went to buy donuts, and I picked up the newspaper, and I lay down in the sofa, and I couldn't read a thing. And I'm like, what's going on here? Yesterday's Sabbath, I was at church. I was able to read the Bible without my glasses. Now I can read the newspaper. I had to put my glasses on. And then I went to my ophthalmologist, and he said, Alberto, the sad news is that you need bifocals. And you need to wear them every day from now on, because without glasses, I can see there's people here. I couldn't tell who's here because I'm almost blind. When those looking through the windows grow dim, because the older we get, the thicker are the lenses, and the arm is not long enough so that we can read. When the doors to the streets are closed and the sound of grinding fades. Have you found yourself going, huh? I'm sorry, what was that? We lose our hearing capabilities. When men rise up at the sound of birds, but all their songs grow faint. Insomnia. Are you going to bed at 8 o'clock and you're awake at 2 in the morning? That's happening to me. I try to stay up as long as I can. Sometimes I manage to stay plus 9:30 in the evening. And by 3 in the morning, I'm wide awake. Because I'm getting old. Because I'm not getting younger. Because these good old days for me are not that great any longer. When men are afraid of heights and of dangers in the streets, we start to develop phobias. We start to be afraid to jump. Last year, my daughter and I had an interesting experience. We were celebrating the 4th of July in Thousand Oaks, where I live. It's a mountainous area. And the fireworks were just across the street, basically, from where I live, in a small hill. But right behind my place, there's another hill. And my daughter and I thought, why don't we go climb up that other hill? And that way we can see the fireworks better. And it was fantastic because we can see the fireworks from there, from Thousand Oaks, and we can see the fireworks from Westlake Village, and we could see the fireworks all the way to Ventura. So we had 3 different fireworks at the same time. But by the time they were over, it was already 11 o'clock. And it was dark. And we didn't have a flashlight. Luckily, our phones have a flashlight. And we decided to go back kind of like the way we had come. We managed, after quite a while, to find our way to the entrance. But by this time, it was close to midnight. And the doors were locked. They had a big lock. I called the sheriff. I called 911. They connected me to the sheriff department. They said, we're going to send somebody. And there was kind of like a pillar about this high. And I thought, I can climb up there and then just jump to the other side. And I managed to climb up there. But when I got to the top, we're talking probably 6 feet, I was afraid to jump to the other side. When I was younger, when I was in high school, I took gymnastics. I was able to jump as high as I am. No problem. But I'm not that young man any longer. Men are afraid of heights and of dangers in the streets. When the almond tree blossoms, when we develop gray hair, the grasshopper drags himself alone. He drags himself along. I'm finding myself having to take pills to fight my stomach because I get all kinds of problems with indigestion. Loss of digestive capability. Desire is no longer is stirred. The original Hebrew says, the caper berry shall become ineffective. And our Bible says, impotence. You become impotent. Sorry, honey, I can't. Remember him before the silver cord is severe, before you get a stroke, or the golden bowl is broken, before you develop Alzheimer's and you don't even remember who you are, much less who that person next to you is, before the pitcher is shattered at the spring, before you get a heart attack, or the wheel is broken at the well, you start to develop circulatory problems with your blood, because we may be getting better, but we're getting older. We had to learn to be satisfied by who we are and how we are right now. Because I repeat, These, for you and me, are the good old days. I want to read to you a poem by an unknown author. It says, youth is not a time of life. It is a state of mind. It is a temper of the will, a quality of the imagination, a vigor of the emotions, a predominance of courage over timidity, of the appetite for adventure over love of ease. Nobody grows old merely living a number of years. People grow old only by deserting their ideals. Years wrinkle the skins, but to give up enthusiasm wrinkles the soul. Worry, doubt, distrust, fear, and despair. These are the long, long years that bow the head and turn the growing spirit back to dust. Whether they are 16 or 70, there is in every being's heart the love of wonder, the sweet amazement at the stars and the star-like things and thoughts, the undaunted challenge of events, the unfailing childlike appetite for what is to come next, and the joy and the game of life. You are as young as your faith, as old as your doubt, as young as your self-confidence, as old as your fear, as young as your hope, as old as your despair. When the wires are all down and all the innermost core of your heart is covered with the snows of pessimism and the eyes of cynicism, then you are grown old indeed. But so long as your heart receives messages of beauty, cheer, courage, grandeur, and power from the earth, from man and from the infinite, so long you are young. And I find consolation in the words of the Apostle Paul to the Romans, chapter 8, verse 28 to 30, where he says, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. For those God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the likeness of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brothers. And those he predestined, he also called. Those he called, he also justified. Those he justified, those he also glorified. And that's you, and that is me. The message of Ecclesiastes 12 is not for the feeble, for the weak. It's not for those in the nursing home. It's not for those that have reached the last miles of the earthly road. It is not for those about to give it all up. It is for the young, for the strong. It is for you, it is for me, regardless of your age. While the blood runs hot through your veins, while you work daily dreams into reality, while you let your step go through a path of your own making, the preacher message is for you. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days come and the years approach when you will say, I find no pleasure in them. Without Christ, joy can only get on the way to happiness. Without Christ, youth can only get on the way of being young. Without Christ, eternity is not the other face of grace. For God's children, the call is to be a positive force. The call is to be the reforming force. The call is to define joy and happiness in youth. While you're still able to sing to love, to the first, to the last, to the daily life, while you're able to laugh and to cry with the simple joys and the simple things of life, while you're still able to believe in God, this message is for you. And I want to make a provocative proposition. I want to propose that we are not called just to be light, but to fight darkness. Remember the little song we used to sing with our children? Maybe you sang it as a child. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. I'm going to let it shine, Let it shine. Let it shine. And my proposition this afternoon is that being a torch or a beacon or a lighthouse is not enough anymore. It's not enough nowadays. My proposition is that to be an effective Christians, we need to fight against darkness. We need to battle against darkness. And I'm not suggesting a crusade. I'm not suggesting a Christian jihad. I'm talking about total commitment on our part. The kind that can be seen by everyone, where people can tell that we have been with Jesus. I read some time ago an article about dark suckers, and I hope you find it interesting. I think it illustrates my point. The document says, Bell Labs proves the existence of dark suckers. And it says, for years, it has been believed that electric bulbs emit light. However, recent information from Bell Labs have proven otherwise. Electric bulbs don't emit light, they suck dark. Thus, they now call these bulbs dark suckers. The dark sucker theory, according to a Bell Labs spokesperson, proved the existence of dark. The dark has mass heavier than that of light, and the dark is faster than light. The basis of the dark sucker theory is that the electric bulbs suck dark. Take, for example, the dark sucker in the room where you are. There is less dark right next to them than there is elsewhere. The larger the dark sucker, the greater its capacity to suck dark. Dark sucker in a parking lot have a much greater capacity than the ones in this room. As with all things, dark suckers don't last forever. Once they are full of dark, they no longer suck. This is proven by the black spot by the black spot on a full dark sucker. A candle is a primitive dark sucker. A new candle has a white wick. You will notice that after the first use, the wick turns black, representing all the dark which has been sucked into it. If you had a pencil next to the wick of an operating candle, the tip will turn black because it got in the path of the dark flowing into the candle. Unfortunately, these primitive dark suckers have a very limited range. They are also portable dark suckers. The bulbs in these can handle all the dark by themselves and must be aided by a dark storage unit. When the dark storage unit is full, it must be either emptied or replaced before the portable dark sucker can operate again. Dark has mass. When dark goes into a dark sucker, friction from this mass generates heat. Thus, it is not wise to touch an operating dark sucker. Candles present a special problem, as the dark must travel in the solid wick instead of through glass. This generates a great amount of heat. Thus, it can be very dangerous to touch an operating candle. Dark is also heavier than light. If you swim deeper and deeper, you notice that it gets slowly darker and darker. When you reach a depth of approximately 50 feet, you are in total darkness. This is because the heavier dark sinks to the bottom of the lake, and the lighter light floats to the top. The immense power of dark cannot be utilized to man's advantage. We can collect the dark that has settled to the bottom of lakes and push it through turbines, which generate electricity and help push it to the ocean where it may be safely stored. Prior to turbines, it was much more difficult to get dark from the rivers and lakes to the oceans. The Indians recognized this problem and tried to solve it. When on a river in a canoe traveling on the same direction as the flow of the dark, they paddled slowly so as not to stop the flow of the dark. But when they were traveling against the flow of the dark, they paddled quickly so as to help push the dark along the way. Finally, we must prove that dark is faster than light. If you were to stand in an illuminated room in front of a closet, a dark closet, then slowly open the closet door, you will see the light slowly enter the closet But since dark is so fast, you wouldn't be able to see the dark leave the closet. In conclusion, Bell Labs has stated that dark sockets make all our lives much easier. So the next time you look at an electric bulb, remember that it is indeed a dark socket. It kind of makes sense in a weird way. And I don't want you to become a sucker of any kind. I want you to stand for Christ. With all the knowledge, with all the science, with all the technology that we now possess, I couldn't have said it better than the Bible writer when he says, "This day I call heaven and earth as witnesses against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life, so that you and your children may live." That's Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 19. But back to Ecclesiastes, a few chapters back. The teacher says, "The words from wise people are like sharp sticks used to guide animals. They are like nails that have been driven in firmly. Altogether, they are wise teachings that comes from one shepherd." Our one shepherd is Christ. A couple of years ago, I had a medical emergency, and I was sent to, a cancer doctor. There's a better term for that. An oncologist. The oncologist says, "Señor Valenzuela, don't worry." He didn't say Señor Valenzuela, he was a gringo. He says, "Mr. Valenzuela, don't worry about it. You're going to die very healthy." And I thought, well, that's very nice. You're not going to die of this. You're going to die very healthy. And that's one of the things that we are facing nowadays. As we go through life, my daughter is working on making me vegan. When she's around, I have to be vegan because it's easier than me eating meat and her being vegan. And as we progress, and as we are more in tune with the needs of our own bodies, we get to live longer, but we don't get to stay younger. Life is too short, indeed, to be filled with bodily concerns. And Jesus has promised to give us abundant life, not just life, but abundant life. And this is the time for you and me to give our life to Jesus. His promise is that we will pass from death to life. And whether we are 80 or 65 or 15, He comes to each one of us with the same invitation to take Him into our lives, to take the torch for Him, and to fight against darkness. And the challenge today for you and for me is to fight life with the full knowledge of having been redeemed by a young, healthy Savior. Because for your benefit and for my benefit, He is and forever be young. May God bless you.